Hi everyone, my name is Mason and I'm going to be doing the computer science portion of tacos this year. So, what is computer science? Computer science is the study of computers and how to compute things. So, to compute something means to determine something, especially by using math. For example, you can compute the answer to 2 plus 2 in your head. A computer, on the other hand, is a device that we use to compute the answers to a lot of different problems. So, what is a computer? All computers can do 4 different things. They can gather input, they can store data, they can process that data, and they can produce output. So, what is an input and output? An input is any method to give the computer information, while an output is any method to get information out of the computer. So, for an input, we're putting things into a computer, like a keyboard or a mouse. An output is a way to get information back out of the computer, so like looking at the screen, for example. So there's a short video on the website here that I'd like you to watch, so go ahead and pause this video and watch that one, and when you're finished with that, you can unpause this video. Alright, so hopefully you've had a chance to watch that video. It goes over those same things, right? Computers can take input, they can store it as data, they can process that data, and then they can output the result. So, using that definition, we know that humans can be computers too. So, if we take the math problem, 4 times 11, and let's talk about how a human computes that answer. So, first you gather the input. So, if you're in math class and you get that question on a piece of paper, you read it, right? So, you use your eyes to gather that information. So, we can see that on the paper is written down 4 times 11. So, we have that data in our head now, right, in our memory, and then we're going to process that data. So for us, if you have the multiplication table memorized, you might just know that the answer is 44. Otherwise, you might have to compute it using a piece of paper, right? So you write down 11, write down the 4 underneath, and you do long multiplication, and you figure out the answer. So that's us processing the data. And then we can output the solution to that, 44, by writing it back down on a piece of paper. Maybe we're just telling our teacher by speaking it. So we could write it down as one way of output. We could say that what the answer is as another way of output. So the computer that we're going to use for most of this week is called a microbit. So a microbit is a computer as well that has several different inputs and outputs. So I've got another video for you that I'd like you to watch, and it talks a little bit about what a microbit is. So, and especially talks about inputs and outputs that the microbit has, so pay attention to those. So go ahead and pause this video, and you can watch that one, and then come back when you're done. Alright, so hopefully you had a chance to watch that video. Let's go through some of the inputs and outputs that a microbit has. You can get your microbit out of the box, so it should look like this, right? I think you have 2 of them. So if you take the microbit and look at it, let's go through what some of the inputs are. So we have the A button right here. We have a B button on the other side. Those are input buttons, as well as a reset button on the back. That does something special, so we can't program that one, but it has a temperature sensor, so that's inside one of these chips back here. It has a temperature sensor, it has a light sensor, it has a Bluetooth radio, so if you look really close in this corner up in the back, you can actually see little squigglies. That's the antenna for the Bluetooth radio. It has a compass somewhere here on the back, you can see. It says compass back here. It has an accelerometer, so an accelerometer can tell if you tip it to the left, the microbit can tell that you tipped it to the left, or if you tip it to the right, it can tell. If you flip it upside down, it can tell that too. So that's what an accelerometer can tell us. It also has these pins on the bottom, so these gold pins, they're labeled 0, 1, and 2, and we have 2 kind of special pins over here, but these 3 pins we can use as inputs, so we'll use those later on in the week actually. And then it also has USB. So we use the USB to get it power, but we can also use the USB port to get information into the microbit. That's how we'll program it. Okay, and then the microbit also has several outputs as well. So you can see that there's a 5x5 grid on the front of LED lights. So we can light up all of those. That's one way to get information back out. So going back to our 4 times 11 problem, right? The microbit could compute 4 times 11 and then display the answer, so it could display 44 using the screen. The Bluetooth radio, so you might have noticed that that's an input as well. So, but we can also use the radio to get information out of the microbit. So it's an input and an output. And then again, we have USB. So USB is a good way to get information in and out. So there are things that can be both inputs and outputs, especially when we're using computers. So let's go ahead and jump right into using the microbit. So there's a link on the website. Hopefully it's showing a little bit of a different color for you. But the website that we're going to use to program the microbits is called makecode.microbit.org. So you can click on that link. We'll get started. So I'll switch my video here to look at make code and just follow along. So hopefully you're looking at my screen here. And hopefully you're at this screen, so this is what you should be looking at if you went to makecode.microbit.org. So we're going to, this is a project that I just created, but we're going to go ahead and create a new project right here. And you can give it any name that you want, but I'm going to call it Hello Microbit. Okay, so once you've given it a name, you can hit create. And if at any time I'm going a little bit too fast, feel free to pause the video, right? And also all of this stuff is listed on the website as well, so you can follow along in both places. Alright, so let's kind of talk about all the different parts of this site that we're seeing here. So on the top left of the screen, you can see a microbit here. So this is what I'll call the virtual microbit. So this microbit up here can show us anything that any program that we write. That microbit will act as if we loaded the microbit onto it. So it's not linked to the microbit that you have in your kit. But this is a good way for us to test our programs because we can see what they'll do before we actually download it onto our other microbit. So up here we'll call that the virtual microbit, as opposed to the physical microbit or the microbits that you got in your kit. So again, it lets us kind of see the behavior of our program before we actually put it on the microbit that we have. So to the right of that over here, we have lots of tabs here, and these have all the different blocks that we can use to program. So if you click on any of these tabs, you'll see a bunch of different blocks in here, and those are all the blocks that we can use to program the microbit. So we'll use lots of these. We'll go through more later, but as well, keep in mind, especially as you see pictures of other people's code or of my code, the blocks are color coded. So if you see a blue colored block, you know it's going to be in the blue color tab, right? Which in this case is basic. But if you see one of these like teal colored ones, you know it comes from the teal color tab, which is logic, and so on and so forth. So going back to here, so this big window, the main part here is what we call the editor. So this is where we're going to drag blocks out to where that we actually want to use to program. So every time we create a new program, you'll have this on start and this forever block. So those will always start there. A lot of times we'll use them. They put them there by default because you use them in a lot of programs, but you don't necessarily have to use them, and you can find them here in the basic category here. But if at any time you don't need to use a block, or if you drag it out here and decide you don't need to use it anymore, you can drag it over here, and you can see that this little trash can shows up, so you can get rid of it. So you can pull it back out here, but so we're not going to use those blocks right now, but they will come in handy in the future. So let's go ahead and write our first program. For this program, we're going to have the microbit take an input, so pushing buttons, that's going to be our input, and the output is going to be the microbit telling us hello and goodbye. So let's go to the input tab, right, because we're going to give it some input, and let's drag a on button A pressed block out here. So we're going to use both the A and B buttons. If you go back to the input tab here, you might notice that there is no block that says on button B pressed. So any of these blocks that have one of these drop down arrows here, that means that there's a different kind of variation on that block. So in this case, we can drag another one on button A pressed out here, and since we already have one, this one kind of has this faded color, but we can click this little drop down on A and switch it to B. So now we've got an on button A pressed and an on button B pressed, so we can use those different inputs. So if you, let's handle the A button first. So for this first program, we're going to have the microbit say hello and your name every time you push the A button. So if you go into basic here, there is a block that's called show string. So let's drag one of those show string blocks over. And you can kind of see too, one thing to keep in mind is like this shape right here. So you can see this has a little curve on top and a curve on bottom. And it's the same thing in this block and these ones too. So you can't snap together blocks that won't work with each other. But you can see these ones are kind of the same shape. So we can drop it in there and it fits, which is awesome. So instead of it just saying hello, we want it to say hello and your name. So my name's Mason, so I'm going to write hello Mason, capital. Okay. So right here, before we load it, or before we program the microbit that came in our kit, remember we have this virtual microbit up in the top left corner. So right now we can already test what our program is going to do. So far we should have on button A pressed, show string, hello Mason. And string in this case is just what we call text. So any words or letters in programming, those are called strings usually. So let's come up here and push the A button on this virtual microbit, and you should see whatever you wrote scroll across. So you can see it saying hello and Mason. So our program's working like we expect it to, right? But on button B pressed, we want it to say goodbye and then your name. So we're going to do the same thing, but with the B button and a little different message. So let's go back into basic. Let's grab a show string, drag it over here. And instead of saying hello, let's say goodbye and your name. So my name's Mason, so goodbye Mason. So we can test our program again, right? So we already tested that the A button says what we think it is, so let's test to make sure that the B button works too. So let's come up here, push the B button, and it says goodbye Mason. So that one's working as well. So now that we've written our first program, we've kind of tested it up here on the virtual microbit. It should work when we download it onto our regular microbit. So there's a couple different ways to flash our microbit. So this will be really helpful if you look at the website and go through the two different ways to flash the microbit. So just pause the video for a second and read through that section that says flashing the microbit, and get to the point where you can see or where you can flash your microbit. So if you're using Windows or a Mac or a Chromebook, it'll look a little bit different, but hopefully you can kind of figure out for your system how it works. There's a link at the bottom, pretty close to the bottom, called Flashing the Microbit Support. So you can click on that, and that'll give you a little bit more help. So pause the video for a little bit, get the microbit flashed, test your program. You have to connect your microbit to your computer with the USB cable, and then push the A and B button and see if you can see the messages. So pause the video for a little bit and come back and we'll continue on. Alright, so hopefully you were able to get the microbit flashed and you could actually use your physical microbit to give you the messages, right? Hello and your name, goodbye and your name. So at this point, that's the basic idea of how to program a microbit. We obviously have lots of different options, and we'll go through some of those later on in the week. For the rest of the time that you want to spend on microbits today, you can hit this home button in the top left here and look at all of these tutorials down here. So there's several cool games and several different tutorials here that you can click on and follow those to do a little bit more practice with the microbit. So we will continue on tomorrow with learning about variables. So I will see you then.